Members, before we start, Sam's coming round with an urgent update, which is about the urgent update we had earlier in the day. And in effect, it cancels out that earlier update. So if you can quickly have a flick through it. Well, what it really says is delay the first one. Don't, and it will all be explained at the time. So when we get to it. All right then, good evening members. Welcome to this Policy and Resources Committee meeting. Again, we'll go through the process. Before we start on the agenda, may I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated to enable Mr Bailey to assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council. But if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? And I don't see anybody indicating. I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members and other members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Mr Bailey, do we have any apologies for absence?
Councillors Bryce, Firma, Gooch, Harper and Barnard.
Thank you. And are there any substitute members?
Councillor Joy for Councillor Firma.
Councillor Round for Councillor Bryce.
And Councillor Atkinson for Councillor Harper.
Thank you, members. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Mumford for Councillor Gooch.
Thank you. You'll note that there is an urgent update to item 10, but as I say, we've now had an urgent update beyond that, which cancels that one out. So the reason for the urgency originally was that it was an update to provide a further legal option to councillors on the item we're discussing, but I think we'll go through it as we actually go through the actual item when we get to it. Notification of visiting members? I don't think we have any. Thank you very much. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a disclosure of any conflict. It's just out of courtesy. I remain on call and there are several things ongoing. So if I suddenly rush out, it's nothing anyone said. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Exempt items. I propose that we take item 11 on the amended agenda, Brunswick and Union Street car park developments in private due to the possible disclosure of exempt information. Is this agreed, members? Thank you. As far as I'm aware, we have no petitions tonight. Thank you. And no questions from members of the public. Thank you very much. So without more ado, if we turn to agenda item 10, which is Phase 3 Public Realm, Mrs Fran Wallace is going to introduce this, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies for the updates on the updates, which I think have confused all of us to a certain extent. I'll take you through the updates on the update that's just been circulated, just to clarify the minor changes that were made to the document that was originally published. It relates to the Highways Act and which section of that Act we've been looking at. We've been looking at Section 278 agreements, which is the standard agreement between a developer and the Highway Authority. Original advice from Mid-Kent Legal was that we could potentially use Section 42 of the Highways Act to carry out the works, but as this most recent update shows, that actually relates to maintenance of the highway, not to new works on the highway. So that was the main difference and clarification. So if I talk through the actual report itself, it's to provide members with an update on the public realm work, including the budget, and to seek approval to enter into this Section 278 agreement with Kent County Council to carry out the works. Firstly, to remind members briefly on the background to this project, it was first presented to this committee in April 2016 with the intention to upgrade the north end of Week Street and Gabriel's Hill. Designers were appointed, however, when the project was subsequently presented, in April 2017, a change in scope was agreed, namely to include the middle section of Week Street, which is from Fremlin Walk up to the High Street. However, at that time, no further funding was agreed and officers were tasked with going away to seek alternative funding. A report was due to go to the Policy and Resources Committee last year to update on the budget. However, it was felt that basing a commitment on an estimate was imprudent. Corporate leadership team therefore agreed to delay the request to Policy and Resources Committee until the tenders were received and the true cost was known. Hence the calling of this particular meeting, because we have now received the tenders. Tenders were sent out on the 5th of January and submissions were received on the 19th of February. 6 tender submissions were received, and based on these, we are now actually not currently expecting a shortfall in the project's budget, even though the initial estimate was showing a possibility. There are various unknowns, particularly around utilities. However, at the moment, the project team are retaining a large contingency for this. Moving on to the section 278, in order to carry out these works, the Council needs permission from KCC to carry out work on their highway. This is normally done through the section 278 agreements, with MBC as the developer and KCC as the highway authority. In terms of a decision for the committee, there are the options available, and the original report shows the 3 options, which were the section 278 agreement, the section 42 option, and obviously to do nothing. The most recent update is now saying that section 42 is not an option. So the 2 options are to enter into a section 278 agreement, which is the standard agreements between developer and highway authority. The cost will be approximately £96,000, which is already identified within the project's budget. As I say, the second option is to do nothing, but we need this agreement to actually do the works. It's a legal requirement. So therefore, the recommendation is to give approval to the head of Mid-Kent Legal to enter into a section 278 agreement. I'd be happy to take any questions to clarify the report and the updates. Thank you.
Before I go to Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Garland, do you have any disclosures to make, and have you been lobbied? No, thank you very much. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. I could understand this being brought to this committee if there was an option 2, a proper option 2, but now that there isn't one, did we not delegate authority to the legal services to proceed on the basis that is suggested here before? And is it necessary to come to us again and ask for that approval?
We didn't actually have delegated authority to enter into the section 278 agreements, which we need to enter that contract. And as I mentioned previously, because we thought there could potentially be a budget shortfall, this meeting was sort of programmed in to potentially ask for more funding. But as I say, now we've had the tenders back, we don't actually need.
So you still need approval to enter into a 278 agreement, do you, from this committee? Right.
Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to move the recommendation on page 1, because I don't think there's any reason not to. And as there are no further questions, I can't see the point in delaying the item any further. So if someone's happy to second it, that would be helpful.
Councillor Harvey just got in there first. Move to the vote then. A show of hands. Those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Members, then I move that the public be excluded from the meeting for the items set out in part 2 of the agenda because of the likely disclosure of exempt information for the reasons specified, having applied